Good morning. So today I want to talk about pronghorn research and management across the state of South Dakota. I want to talk about the data that we collect and analyze from our surveys and our research. And ultimately I want to talk about the reasoning and the justification behind the recommendations for proposal that you have in front of you today. So, is there a non button?
Yeah, fine.
That always helps. That one. So jumping right into it, we have several surveys that we do for pronghorn. Our hunter harvest survey is an important one. Like all of our species, we also monitor recruitment in the fall. We do have aerial surveys that we can conduct for pronghorn, so that's kind of unique. We have a good way of surveying that population from the air. And like all of our big game species, we do some population modeling to predict where our populations are at currently, and also to project where they might be in the future. Pronghorn is one of our few big game species that we have an active management plan, a recent updated management plan for. And today I want to talk about that and some of the objectives in that plan. And then I want to end with some of the research projects that we're doing on pronghorn. So jumping into our harvest data set, this is our Firearm pronghorn season harvest from 2002 to 2013. You can see in 2013 we only had about close to 3,500 resident firearm licenses. You can see there have been no non-resident firearm licenses the last 2 years. Our harvest was pretty low last year, just a little bit over 1,900. You can see the bulk of that harvest at a little over 1,400 were bucks. So minimal doe harvest, which is what we want when our populations are low and we're trying to build back populations in all of our management units. Success was a little lower than we'd like to see at 48%. We'd like to see success rates for pronghorn probably above 60%. Like you can see, we had there in the early 2000s, the mid 2000s, when we had a lot of pronghorn on the ground there, we had good success of 60 to 70%. Our harvest tracks our populations pretty well. You can see here we peaked at about that doesn't go on the screen, but we peaked at about 2008 was our peak pronghorn population there. You can see we harvested with our firearm season about 17,000 pronghorns. So a lot of hunter opportunity there for this species. We were really trying to get on the pronghorn population. It was above objective just not too long ago in 2008, and that's pretty well represented by our doe harvest that year of 9,500. We were really trying to get on that population, but unfortunately, 2008, 2009, we had a severe winter, which we needed a little bit of help to get on the population. But we also had a severe winter in 2009, 2010. And we also had a severe winter in 2010, 2011. So we got hit with 3 substantial severe winters in our pronghorn range that coincided with some peak harvests, and subsequently we are below objective in all of our management units. And I'll get into a little bit more of that here as we move forward today. I want to talk a little bit about our season dates and how it pertained to the record October storm we had this last year. We get some questions about that. Last year, our pronghorn season opened on September 28th, which was about a week before that big October storm we had. So we did have our opening weekend of pronghorn, which is when we see the bulk of our harvest. We have a lot of participation on that opening weekend. So overall, our harvest rate probably wasn't significantly impacted. But that second week, definitely in a lot of the areas, a lot of pronghorn units, there was definitely access issues that second weekend when that substantial October storm hit. So want to bring that up a little bit. I don't think it was significant overall in our harvest, but definitely that second weekend it had an impact. So here's the history of our firearm season. I'm going back to the mid-70s. You can see the peaks and valleys there. Those pretty much coincide with substantial winter events. Pronghorn are very susceptible to overwinter mortality when we have severe winters, and those ups and downs definitely track our severe winters. Again, you can see there leading up into 2008, we were at the record pronghorn populations, and that's demonstrated by our attempt to try and harvest those species. You can see the colored circles there is the harvest. In 2008 we peaked out there, and then we've been going down there ever since. Also of interesting note is the kind of hard to see here, but the squares there, the hollow squares, those are tag numbers, and we had record tag numbers there. We were really doing everything we could, trying to think outside the box to have a lot of tags on the ground to try and get on top of that population, and you can see we had record tag numbers there in 2008. That top line you see is our harvest success all the way back to 1975, and like I said earlier, we'd like to see that harvest success above 60%. We should have that for pronghorn, and generally we are in that 60-70% range. But you can see here after this last substantial winter events, we're down there to around the 40-50% success. So getting on to our archery harvest, the last 3 years archery harvest, even with our low populations, of course some of the participation has waned with the lower populations, but we've been pretty consistent the last 3 years around that 1,200 archery hunters. Non-resident archery hunters have not been restricted, so even though they haven't had firearm licenses available to them, they still could pick up an archery tag. Kind of thought we'd see a big spike in some non-resident participation in the archery pronghorn season, and we really haven't. It's been pretty steady the last couple of years, around that 250 to 300 mark. Overall archery success at 23%, which isn't bad, but it's a little lower than it was in the peak years. This last year we did collect some location data with our archery harvest just to try and get a better feel for where some of that harvest has taken place, and you can see where definitely the hot spots are for archery hunters in the state there. Of course, up there in Harding County and Butte County, those are, and down there in Fall River County, those are really where the most dense populations of pronghorn are in the state, and the archery hunters are definitely keying in on that. We do have some youth hunting opportunities through our mentored youth program. Been pretty good participation in mentored youth hunting opportunities there. You can see last year at 350, which was actually a record number of licenses sold. So even with low populations, we're still getting a lot of youth out there to participate in pronghorn hunting. Overall success wasn't bad at about 31%, and just a little over 100 animals harvested through our mentored youth season. So on to our recruitment surveys. We do these in August and September. These are random ground counts. We try to count about 10% of what we estimate the doe population to be out there. Last year we ended up classifying about 2,300 animals. And our ratio for 2013 was 59 fawns per 100 does, which was a record low. And that does affect our recommendations that you're going to see in front of you today. That low recruitment makes it hard to build that population back as quick as we want. Just the year before we were at about 71, which is definitely more what we want to see. But we did see some geographical differences in our fawn recruitment. And out west in Region 1, the western part of our pronghorn range, and where the bulk of our animals are, we saw about 66 fawns per 100 does. So that's good news for where the bulk of our animals are. But in Region 2, that's the central part of the state, and in the eastern part of the pronghorn range in the state, we were very low recruitment rates at 42 fawns per 100 does. And one thing I want to emphasize is as we move forward in trying to look into the future and what we'll have this year, we really don't know what recruitment is. We have to make some assumptions. When we model our populations on what recruitment is, and what we do is look at the most recent year, and so we'll look back at 2013 and use those recruitment rates to estimate where we're going to be this year. So here's what recruitment is looking back into the late 60s there. Again, I want to point out this last year at 59 fawns per 100 doe, we were at a record low. Usually we're more around that 80 fawns per 100 does. We do conduct aerial surveys of pronghorn, and this is unique in that we have the ability to get some really good counts on our pronghorn populations. They are a very visible species in the spring, and they occupy open habitats, so we can really fly and get some good counts. We usually do these in May to June. We fly about 1/3 of our pronghorn units usually. East River we survey about 100%. Last year in 2013, our aerial survey estimate with recruitment added onto it was at about 36,000 animals, so a slightly growing population. Now this year, we did not fly our aerial surveys, as we mentioned last month. We were not going to do our aerial surveys for pronghorn. What we're going to do is evaluate our harvest. We're going to look at recruitment. We're going to look at the public input that we've been getting, and we're going to evaluate some of our models to come up with our recommendations. Now the reasoning behind us not flying this year, the primary reason is we don't anticipate any major change in our population. We know we're down there lower. We don't predict that they're going to go any lower or they're going to make any huge jumps upwards, and we'll get into some estimates here in a minute. So we don't anticipate any big changes. We're bringing forward to you only some minor changes in licenses. You know, in the effort of trying to prioritize our staff and you know, our funding and time, it's pretty hard to spend that much money on flying for pronghorn. And we really don't anticipate any big changes in the population. We're really not bringing forward to you any big changes in license numbers, so we're going to go with some model estimates of our population, and I'll get into some of those now. So we have a couple models that we've developed for pronghorn. The first is we'll call it our projection model. This is basically just a deterministic spreadsheet model. It's a model that we put in an Excel spreadsheet using numerous data sources. We use our aerial survey population estimates, we use our recruitment estimates, we use our herd composition estimates, and then we look at survival estimates we had from research back in 2004 and 2005. So they are a little bit dated survival estimates, but that's the most recent we have from research. These are similar type of models that we use for our deer populations, that we use for our elk populations, and even our lion populations to some extent when we're trying to project out into the future. Now the next model I want to talk about is our winter severity index model. Now last month when we talked about deer, we went over winter severity indices and what a WSI value means. But again, I'll just kind of reiterate that. Our WSI value is a value that simply takes into account temperature and snow depth. And so you have a higher WSI value, it means you have lower temperatures and higher snow depths, which means you have a more severe winter. So the higher the WSI, the more severe the winter. So here's our WSI values for our pronghorn range. I'm looking back all the way back to 2000 and 2001. So this is the winter of 2000-2001. Was actually a fairly severe winter in our pronghorn range, at least above average, and that red line's the average winter in our pronghorn units. You can see here the WSI value definitely demonstrates in 2008 and 9 and 10, and 10 and 11 we had severe winters, and that was also at a time when we were harvesting record numbers of animals. That's what our WSI value looks like specifically for our pronghorn units. So getting a little bit into the modeling, excuse me. Winter severity indices and overwinter survival are related in many of our ungulate populations. We see that in deer, and in different studies across the states, we also see that in our pronghorn. But we wanted to see what that looked like for pronghorn in South Dakota. So we estimated overwinter survival to look at the relationship between the WSI and overwinter survival. We estimated our overwinter survival using our aerial survey and recruitment and harvest data sets. And on average, we had about 81% overwinter survival, so not too bad. And then we looked at the relationship between our overwinter survival and our WSI values. So we have WSI values on the x-axis here, and then on the y-axis we have our overwinter survival. And so for each point, you have a related WSI value, you have the overwinter survival associated with that WSI value. So basically what you can see, as the WSI value increases, In other words, as the winter becomes more severe, we see a lower overwinter survival. So it did demonstrate that in South Dakota, overwinter survival is substantially affected by the WSI or the severe winters. So that led us to build a model. We built a logistic regression model based on this relationship to predict overwinter survival, and then we put that into a projection model to see what we get for an estimate. So we kind of tested the model, and we went back into time, and it's a little hard to see here, but the blue bars are the actual aerial survey counts there. And then we went back and said, well, what if we would have just projected and used our model? And that's the red bars. And you can see there's a very good association between the actual spring counts from our aerial surveys and what we would have projected not having that data. So we have a very good relationship between the model and the actual count, which gives us some assurance in the WSI model that we're going to present here today. So what are the results? For the WSI model for 2014, this is a preseason pronghorn population. We're estimating we're going to have about 38,500, so just a slight increase in our pronghorn population. Using the projection model, it's a little bit higher. We're estimating about 41,600 pronghorn. Again, that's a preseason estimate. So this is how it looks compared to last year. Statewide, using the projection model, we're predicting about a 15% increase. If we just look at the WSI model, we're looking at about a 6% increase. So either way, depending on what model you use, the bottom line is we are seeing an increase in our pronghorn population. Like I mentioned before, we do see some differences geographically in the state, and this is important to take note. In the western part of the state and western part of the pronghorn region, you can see there in region 1, we're predicting some pretty good increases, either 16% or 7%, depending on which model you look at. So that's good because that's where the bulk of our species are. Unfortunately, in the central part of the state, we're probably holding pretty steady. We're not going to see some substantial increases in any of those units in the central part of the state. So this is what our estimates look like over time. This is using the WSI estimate. You can see there in red. You know, the good news is, like I said before, it is still going up. You can see the peaks, like I mentioned, and then we have hard winters, and then you get to the valleys. One thing I do want to point out here is that this last time when we dropped, can't really see it, but we only dropped down to 30-something thousand pronghorn. You can see our other drops in other years. We were down less than 20,000, close to 10,000. So that is good. We were able to stop that curve a little bit, and so I think we're going to come out a little bit faster than we did some of those other years. Using the projection model, that puts us a little bit above 40,000. It's a little better outcome there, but essentially they're really not different. And then, how does that relate to our current population objective? And I have an asterisk by this because this is the objective that we have in the current management plan. And I'm going to talk about that here in a minute. But we have an objective for statewide of 50 to 60,000 animals. And you can see we have a little bit of ways to get to the lower end of that objective. So looking at each unit here, we go through and field staff within the regions decide where they want to go with their pronghorn population in each of our management units. The blues signify that we want to increase the population. If it's light blue, that's a slight increase. And if it's dark blue, that means we want to substantially increase the number of animals we have in those units. So you can see all the units across the state, we want to increase the population. So that's where we're heading. And with that, I want to get a little bit into our management plan. I mentioned that some of those objectives in our management plan, we're going to see some changes in those. Right now, the current version that we have is a 2012 version. That's when we wrote the plan. We're going to be bringing to you next month in July a revised pronghorn management plan, and we have a couple parts of that management plan that I want to bring to your attention here that we're going to update. Probably most importantly, or one of the most significant updates that you're going to see is in the population objectives. Now, in the 2012 version, we had one of our goals and objectives in that 2012 version is we were going to go back in every management unit and we were going to actually figure out what we wanted for a population objective in that unit. We hadn't done that before, so now we have an actual number for every unit that we're trying to shoot for. And we can do that with Pronghorn because we have an actual number for every unit, because we can fly and we can count the species, and it's a good survey that we can do. So we went back and did that in every unit across the state. So now we have a number that we're going to be shooting for in every unit, and we've taken some public input on this. The regions have taken it out during their public input meetings, and they've discussed it with their RAP panel meetings. They've done some revisions after some of that public input, but we're ready to put it in the plan, and we're ready to present it to you as a commission. So that's going to be a big change, and probably the most importantly is when you add up all those unit objectives, that's going to affect our statewide objective. Now, last time we didn't have unit objectives when we wrote the plan, so we kind of looked historically where we were, and we picked a range of where we thought we probably should be statewide. But we didn't look unit by unit. Now we're looking unit by unit, and when you add those up, it's going to be a higher number than what we saw, that 50 to 60,000. So I think we'll have some interesting discussion on that. But probably the distribution of where we want those animals is a little different than when you just look at a statewide picture. So another thing you're going to see is we're going to have an aerial survey rotation in that survey plan. We're going to have spelled out when we're going to do surveys, when we're not. And then we're also going to have a recommendation in that plan, or at least a plan in there on how we're going to allocate non-resident licenses. So that'll be in the management plan. And that'll be in our management table. We have a strategies table. That'll be in the revision in that table. So speaking of non-residents, last year when we presented our Pronghorn recommendations, you, the Commission, challenged us to come back to you with a plan for how you can allocate non-resident licenses, non-resident firearm licenses specifically. So we've been working on that. We evaluated several things to try and come up with some type of, I don't want to call it magic, but some type of threshold that we could look at that would be reasonable and justifiable looking at the numbers. We looked at percent unsuccessful resident applicants to see if there was a threshold there. We looked at resident license numbers. We looked at Pronghorn numbers. Maybe there's a magic number we can pick out there and say when it gets below this, we'll remove non-residents. We really didn't find anything, any consistency in the way we've done it in the past that would lend us to want to make a recommendation that we felt comfortable with. And I'm not going to spend any time going over all the details of those because we didn't really think any of them were successful. I do have the data with me. If any of you have questions later, I can go back and we can look at it. But I wanted to spend time talking about what we are going to recommend. What we are going to recommend for non-resident allocation is going to be based off our management strategies table that's actually in our Pronghorn plan right now. Now, like I mentioned, we've made some revisions to that, and this is draft, but you will have the final version next month for the July Commission meeting. You'll have that before the meeting. You'll have time to look at that. But our non-resident allocation is going to be based on our management strategies, and this really does make sense. This is a table we have in our plan, and so we have what we have on the left-hand side, the far left column, is we have all these different management tools from what type of harvest rate we want, license numbers, license types, season eligibility, season structure, extra seasons, all that type, all these different types of tools that we have to manage the species. And those tools and what options we have is based on where we want to go with that population, whether or not we want to increase, maintain, or decrease the population. So we have a different suite of tools there that we can look at and use to manage each unit differently based on where we want to go and what the objectives are. You can see one of those options that we have is the firearm license eligibility. And it's a little bit hard to see, I know, but it's that one that's right there. And we actually had this in the plan. We had, okay, it's actually in your book. If you can't see it and you want to look, it's on page 18A. Yep, that might be a little bit easier to see. Thanks, Tom. What I want to go over here is what we have right now. Now, we used to have 0, less than or equal to 8%, less than or equal to 8%. So we weren't real specific in our old version of our plan. This time, we're going to actually narrow it down and say what we think we should have underneath each harvest strategy. What we're recommending is that if we're in the restrictive category, that we'll allow up to 2%, or we'll allow 2% of the firearm licenses allocation for non-residents. If we're in the moderate and we're wanting to maintain, non-resident allocation would be at 4%, and if we're in the liberal where we're trying to decrease the population, non-residents would be at 8%. So underneath our recommendation, in the future, we would not have situations where we pulled 100% of the non-resident licenses. 2% is not biologically significant. It would still allow for some very limited non-resident opportunities, unless, of course, we close the season, then that would automatically be closed as well. But that's our recommendation. You know, normally this is kind of give and take here. Normally we've had a 0% in this, very restrictive, and then when we get up to the moderate and liberal, we've been at 8% for the most part in the past. Sometimes we've done 7%. We're recommending 2, 4, and 8. So that 4% may be a little bit less than sometimes we've offered in the past, but there's a little bit of give and take in that we're never going to go to 0 underneath our recommendation that we're providing to you as a commission. So moving right into our recommendations, we're proposing, or recommending the commission propose that there'll be 2,700 licenses and tags available. This is a reduction of about 520 licenses, so we're still trying to tweak the numbers down a little bit. Like I mentioned earlier, we did see some really low recruitment rates last year that did affect our projections and where the population is. We wanted to see a little bit quicker of a bump in that population, so we're tweaking it down a little bit. Tag-wise, we are looking at about a 25% reduction in tags. Overall, when we look at what type of harvest rate this will be on our population, we're at about a 3% harvest rate. Again, like I mentioned, non-resident firearm licenses will be allocated based on that management table and what each unit is looking at for a management strategy. Underneath that scenario, we're looking at about 61 non-resident licenses this year. And of course, they're still eligible for archery. So that's the management part and the recommendations that we have. I just got a couple of quick slides here to close it up with what we're doing for pronghorn research. We have 2 studies going on right now. The first study is an evaluation of deer and pronghorn herd composition surveys. This is being conducted through SDSU Dr. Jinks and a master student, Chris Cudmore. This is a pretty big study. We're not only looking at pronghorn classification surveys, we're looking at deer classification surveys. This grad student is also the grad student that's looking at the Black Hills deer distance sampling road transects as well. But I just want to talk about pronghorn today. This study is looking to try and determine our optimum sample sizes that we need when we're out there doing recruitment surveys. So we need to narrow that down a little bit better. It's also looking at whether or not we should be doing our surveys in August and September, and whether or not there are any statistical differences between the results that we get in those months. Right now we do them both months. So we're trying to see if we can narrow down some of the survey protocols that we have. It's also looking at other things like, are there differences between survey results and the number of observers you have. And right now we have 2 years of data, so the field seasons are done. This is actually part of the WMI report that you have. This is one of the tasks that WMI gave to us, is trying to look at our fall recruitment surveys for both deer and pronghorn. So this is going to address a lot of the questions and concerns that they may have had in that WMI report. Like I mentioned, we've done with the field season, and right now we're looking at about a year's time frame between when the field work's done and when SDSU will get us a final product and recommendations that we can move forward with on our surveys in the future. And then we have another survey here, or another research project here, that we're just going to be getting started here this summer. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be up in the northwest part of our state, and we're going to be looking at survival movements, habitat selection, real similar to what we did back in 2004 and 5. I mentioned we're using those survival rates in our models, but survival can definitely change over time. So we basically want to reassess what survival is and movements up in that part of the range. Another important part that we added to that study is we're going to be looking, trying to quantify our aerial survey a little bit better, looking at a siteability estimate that'll give us a little better estimate on our pronghorn. We know that we don't see 100% of the animals. We'll actually have a number now that we can use as a detection rate when we're doing those surveys to better refine our overall aerial survey estimate. With that, that's all I have for you today, unless we have some questions. Sure, entertain them.
Questions for Andy? Nicely done, Andy. Go ahead.
Thanks for the report. I appreciate that. And comment would be, I really think you're on the right track. The way we're doing this, where scenarios kind of dictate what we're going to do with the population, and I really like the idea and the way you're going with that. So
good.
It's positive. Two questions. You said you were going to do another aerial survey. Will you do those like every 5 years or something, or what kind of, how often?
Yeah, we need to better define that. Right now, we're probably looking at every other year until we, get some better data for our modeling. Like I mentioned, we need to really update our survival estimates, and we get some better survival estimates. We might be able to space that out a little bit further, which would be nice. But right now, we're looking at every other year.
And then, like in our area there, does antelope population follow deer population very closely? I know like now they're both kind of down. Is there any relation you can make between the two species there, or are they pretty much independent?
Well, they're definitely independent, but you're definitely onto something too, and that the trends do tend to follow each other, at least in some years. Like I mentioned, those 3 substantial winters we had, those affected our pronghorn population, but they definitely affected our deer population in some of those areas too. Now deer are usually a little more winter savvy or winter hardy, but when it gets to be so severe, we see it affect both species. So yeah, the populations can trend similarly.
Thanks.
Yep.
Other questions? Nice job, Andy. Appreciate the time you spent.
Yep.
We'll take item 18, do the antelope hunting season proposal, and then I want to take a minute and have Jeff Van Meteren and some of his staff are here, and I'd like Jeff introduce them so we can thank them for their hospitality here that we've had this last 3 days. So let's do 18, and then we'll take just a short break.
Okay. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, Secretary Vonk. On page 18 would be the antelope hunting season proposal for your adoption. There at the top, you would see the season dates for the 2014 season would be October 4th through October 19th for the firearm season. Not going to go on a lot of details on this. Andy did a good job covering that from his presentation. I guess in a nutshell, looking at what we have for a recommended change for the number of licenses or license types would be the reduction would occur primarily with our antlerless tags, our doe tags, and primarily outside of our primary range. You remember Andy talking about in his presentation some of the uniqueness of some of the management units and where those units fall geographically within the state. Our stronghold, where our high density population is right now, we feel is doing pretty well. If you remember the recruitment numbers that Andy shared with you for Region 2 in the central part of the state, we're not where we'd like to see them. That's where you're seeing a lot of these cuts come from, just to try to help get that population going in that direction based upon those recruitment estimates that we observed from our fall classification survey. So if you would turn, Mr. Chair, to page 18A, again there, that's the same graph that Andy had shared in his presentation. You can see there in that first column, if you go down about halfway, the firearm license eligibility, you will see the percentage allocated to non-residents based upon the management objective by unit. And we'd like to go by unit with this because of the variation of antelope habitat across our range, and just allow us more flexibility to manage those herds within those units. It is a different scheme across the different management options, but we think we can clearly state this to our applicants in our antelope hunting application. They'll easily be able to identify the number of non-resident licenses by management unit. And then if you turn, Mr. Chair, to page 18C, I just wanted you to note there on that table that lists the number of licenses and the license types by management unit. In that third column there, you would see the percentage of those licenses allocated for non-residents, whether that be 2, 4, or 8. And you would see that all but just a handful, 2 or 3 of them here, are at that 2% level. So turning back, I guess, to page 18, recommended change number 3 would be to essentially close Unit 60A, which would be Tripp County. So no antlers or no firearm licenses would be issued for that unit. So by default, an administrative rule, that season would also be, or that unit would also be closed to the archery antelope hunting season. So for the 2014 fall hunting season, we'd recommend that Tripp be closed, Lyman County, and then the Fort Pierre National Grasslands would be the 3 units closed with the issuance of no firearm licenses, and thus would by default be closed to archery antelope hunting season. I guess with that, Mr. Chair, if you have any questions.
Questions from the commission? Go ahead, Kathy.
On like Tripp County where it's closed, as numbers go up, then does that have the option of opening back up?
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Any other questions, concerns? Wayne? Good idea. Right. Yeah. I think this helps address some of the stuff that WMI brought out as you guys work towards your overall action plan. And we got the plan, and now you're basically looking at the implementation issues. Appreciate that.
And like Mr. Chair, like Andy said, we will try to make those modifications or revisions to our current management plan and get that out to you ASAP as soon as we can, so you have time to review that before we ask you to adopt or whatnot at the July meeting. So
For the finalization.
correct.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Judd. Any other questions? Okay, I'll entertain a motion for approval of the antelope hunting season proposal. Moved by Spies. Second by Peterson. Or Barry. Let's choose Barry. Okay. We're just trying to get along here. Second by Barry. Any questions before we vote? All in favor of approval for the antelope hunting season proposal indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Pass. Thank you guys for all the work. Jeff, can I get you to maybe grab a mic and give us the opportunity to say thanks to your staff? If you could introduce them for us, I'd really appreciate it. You might have to come over here and use my microphone, unless you want me to fix it.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to do that, Chairman Cooper. Have a great team here at Lewis and Clark Recreation Area. We have a very veteran staff, and I'm going to ask them to stand up. I'm going to introduce my district manager that works directly with me. In our region here, we have 5 districts. Lewis and Clark is by far the largest district. Shane, do you want to stand up? Shane Birch is the district park manager here. So, like I was saying on the tour yesterday, I got up early and mowed 400 acres of grass, cleaned 21 buildings, and all. No, I did not do that.
We knew that.
I'm sure you did. Shane has been here since 2001. Came with the transition when we moved the park, or took over the Corps of Engineers areas, and has grown and actually been here now 13 years. That's a long time, Shane. From Miller, South Dakota. He's proud of Miller. Always likes to bring that up. And I'm going to let him introduce his staff, if you don't mind.
Sure. Right ahead.
Thanks, Jeff. First, I'd like to introduce Jeannie Schrader. She's our administrative professional or senior secretary. Been here for 38 years. She's seen a lot of changes here, and
All of her life she's been here.
she's trained a lot of us. And Next, Melissa Ziegenhagen. She's the assistant manager, and she's been here for 2 years. And Jim Gunderson, he's our overall maintenance supervisor or physical plant manager. And Jim served in about 3 different roles here, and we're glad to have him in his position now. He holds everything together on the maintenance side. He's got 11 total years in. Jim Shenaha, there's Jim. He's our building maintenance supervisor, keeps all the buildings in shape. We have 25 comfort stations, not to mention the shelters and cabins and all that stuff. He does a lot of the repairs on those. He's been here for 5 years. Dale Dawson. Dale is our conservation foreman, and all the landscaping and tree work in the park, grounds work, Dale's in charge of that. Does a great job. He's been here for 7 years. And Brad Jones. Brad's originally from Iowa, so we won't hold that against him. But he's been here for 2 years, and he's actually got a wildlife degree, and we're glad to have him on the park side. He does all the mowing that you see out there. Brad runs the crew, keeps everything mowed up. Then we have Scott Parr here. He retired from the Postal Service and decided he wanted to work outside, so we were glad to hire him. He is in charge of keeping all the buildings clean and the grounds clean. And Scott's been in that position for a year, but he did work as a seasonal before that. Thanks, Scott. I think that's it.
Couple other people will quick mention. Scott Pospisil is our park ranger. Scott's been here for probably about 8 years, I'm thinking right now. He's not here today. He was working the late shift last night, like most of our rangers do. And then I'm gonna embarrass Sam and Tony. Raise your hand. Sam is the conservation officer here for Yankton County. Actually, what is your new title, Sam? Supervisor? Okay, District CO Supervisor. And Dan Altman is the Conservation Officer assigned to Yankton County. Dan is not here today. I'm sure he's busy doing work. And Tony Stokely is the Conservation Officer down in Union and Clay counties. So that's the staff. And we really appreciate you guys coming here and taking the time to look around.
I'm going to have you guys all stand up just a second so we can give you one of the things that's amazing is to come down here and take the tour like we did with Scott and Jeff yesterday, and then see how nice everything looks and how much time and effort goes into keeping something as large as this complex going. And then we get nothing but positive comments on Lewis and Clark from a variety of different people who come here to visit, whether they're day visitors or campers or longtime people from Yankton. So just want to compliment you guys on all the effort you put in to make this thing be like it is. Pretty cool deal, and we really appreciate it. So thank you very much. Now you can go back to work. Well, that's what Jeff said anyway. Thank you very much, guys. Thanks for hospitality. Okay, we get started back, if we can, on Custer State